Hi everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks. And finally, the double-barreled tech tree is here. It's live on the 1.7.1 test server that just went up yesterday. In today's video, I'm going to let you know everything there is to know about the 3 new double-barreled tanks, culminating with the ST2 at tier 10. I'm really going to try and focus on how to get prepared for the tech tree today, and specifically when you approach it, some tips and tricks. Of course, everything is subject to change at the moment as to how I would go about upgrading these vehicles so you can make them as painless as possible. Alright, so firstly, where does the IS-2 come into play? Well, it's after the KV3. So the first things to mention are that you need to unlock the 100mm on the KV3 and you need to save up 51,300 experience to be able to unlock the IS-2. And so if for some reason you haven't already unchecked accelerated crew training on your KV3 or you need to repurchase one and start grinding, get onto that if you want to prepare for the double-barrel tanks. So the first tank in question, the IS-2, let's take a look at it. So this is actually the upgraded turret on the tank. I'll show you what the stock turret looks like. Ooh, wow, a bit of a chunky boy, right? All of these double-barrel tanks are going to be very, very fat indeed. So how would I go about upgrading the IS-2? Well, unfortunately, a lot of you are going to be disappointed to find out that all of the modules on all of the double-barreled tanks are completely unique. The engines are all for exactly the tank that they're intended to be on. The only thing that you're going to be able to cross with these kind of tanks are the radio. So as you can see, you will most likely already unlock the radio for these vehicles, but the radio is probably one of the least important, if not the least important modules on the tank. So let's talk about the IS-2. It starts with an 85mm gun. And if you use the stock turret on this tank, this 85mm at tier 8, 180 alpha damage, ooh, that's not going to be very good. But still, with the kind of rate of fire that the vehicle has, and the unload salvo time of 2.5 seconds, and the shell lockout time of 3 seconds, that's actually really, really bad. You probably will not want to fire double shots inside the IS-2 because you're going to charge up the shell for 2.5, or you're going to charge up the double shot for 2.5 seconds, and then after you fire the double shot, you're going to have a 3-second lockout timer. Yeah, doesn't really make much sense, does it, when the gun reloads after 6 seconds anyway. So effectively, by charging up the shell and releasing the shell, you're going to pretty much lose at least half of a reload, if not a full reload, if you're not reacting and making sure you're charging the shot up as you come around the corner. And that's really where the double-barrel tanks are going to be strong. So this gun definitely doesn't look like it's going to be the business. The 100mm on this tank, however, after playing with it in a couple of battles, was pretty darn awesome. It's got the same delay time for the charge up of the shots, 2.5 seconds, but your alpha damage has gone up from 180 to 300, which means that firing double shots on the 100mm is a much more appealing thing. However, the lockout time has gone from 3 seconds to 4 seconds, which you're going to have to watch out for, and again with a 9.5 second reload for a 300 alpha damage shell, it doesn't still feel like this tank is the one to be to just firing doubles all the time. And because of just the fact that the alpha damage is so low and the gun reload time of 9.5 seconds with that unlock time of, with the locked out time of 4 seconds, it will really penalize you if you go into that. Also, we can see that the accuracy stays the same between the 85mm and the 100mm. And so, yeah, I would probably get the gun first on this tank. Interestingly enough, we can actually see that the 100mm on this vehicle weighs less than the 85mm, so definitely no point in upgrading the tracks. Now, will you have to upgrade the turret on this tank? Well, no, you can use the stock tracks and still have full equipment, and you can use the turret, and you can, of course, put the top gun on as well. So my recommended course for action will be to upgrade the gun first and the turret second. Now, when you use the 100mm gun with this tank and you upgrade the turret, you actually get some quite nice buffs. Firstly, the reload time goes down by a second. The preparation time for a double shot goes from 2.5 seconds down to 2, which is really awesome. The accuracy gets better, the aim time gets better. Yeah, the turret definitely makes this thing a substantial amount better on this vehicle. And so if you can, I guess you're going to have to save up that 16,600 free experience and the 19,600 free experience if you want to play this tank really very well right from the get-go. So how bad is the stock engine compared to the upgraded engine on this tank? Well, you've got more of a chance to be set on fire and you've got 70 less horsepower. The upgraded engine is also 50 kilograms lighter, but that's definitely not the priority. I would recommend getting all of the other modules first, and then get the engine, then get yourself the tracks, and then, if you've probably already got the radio unlocked, well, equip that radio. So when you've got the IS-2 fully upgraded, what do I think about this vehicle? My initial impressions of it. This 100mm is very nice indeed. The fact that your delay for unloading a double shot is only 2 seconds means that, yeah, this vehicle can be very reactive. Unlike the Object 703 version 2, the premium tank that a lot of people have got used to, where it's got a 3-second charge up time. Now sure, you're not going to be hitting for 390, you're not going to be putting double shots in for 780 combined, but the aim time, 1 second better, the accuracy substantially better, and more importantly, the fact that your damage per minute goes from the 785 base that you will have on that tank up to 2,359 is a big old upgrade. Now, what else do I like about the IS-2 Well, I love the fact that the tank has 7 degrees of gun depression. That makes this tank fairly flexible on a ridgeline, but what is not to look forward to is the fact that the armor is just awful. 110mm of frontal hull armor, it's not really going to be bouncing much, and 90mm of side armor, but the most important thing to mention about the side is that it doesn't have an angled midplate. What do I mean by an angled midplate? Well, if we look at the 703 version 2, you can see this big old weld across the middle of the side here. What that means is that this is actually the hull armor, and this chunk here is added spaced armor. And so when you angle a vehicle that has this kind of side profile here, like this, if your enemies shoot you all across the middle part of the vehicle, firstly, you've got space protection to protect you from heat rounds, and secondly, it's just going to be very well angled if it hits that plate, even if it's armor piercing or APCR, and it's likely to bounce. So that's why the 703 has this magical armor. The upper part of the vehicle is protected, and the tracks protect the lower part of the vehicle to go along with the 100mm of side armor. Yeah, the IS-2 is definitely not going to be that good. Not only does it lose 10mm of side armor, it doesn't have that angled spaced protection along the upper part. You're just going to have to hope that your tracks help you out. So really, the IS-2 it's all about 100mm, better damage per minute, better gun depression as well on the vehicle, and the fact that its power to weight at 14.61 is very decent indeed. It's much better in a straight line up until its speed limit, which is really what limits the IS-2 at the moment. The 703 version 2 goes at 38 kilometers an hour forwards and 15 backwards, whereas the IS-2 goes at 34 forwards and 12 backwards. Oh, if only it was just a little bit faster. This thing's going to be a bit of a glass cannon double-barrel tank. It won't be too painful to play through. And when you're fighting these things out on the battlefield, there's 2 things that I want to highlight. Number 1, do you notice how the barrels aren't actually in the center? If we look at like this, you'll notice that when you're facing the tank, this left cheek here, which is actually the cheek's right tank, as if you're playing the tank, is very vulnerable. It doesn't have a mantlet covering it, and it looks like this will be quite an easy part to pen on the turret. You can't really do that on the other side though, because as we can see, the barrels are off center. Another thing that you can take advantage if you're fighting these tanks on the battlefield will be the fact that it has 350 meters base view range. That's abysmal. You will definitely be able to outspot these tanks. However, one thing I should mention is because they are auto-reloaders, they can't use gun rammers, and that means that you should be able to use coated optics on this tank, definitely. I can't really see a point of using a gun laying drive when you've only got a 2.5 second aim time, unlike on the 703 version 2 with that abysmal 3.5 seconds aim time, so you might want to use the gun laying drive there. So maybe the IS-2 with coated optics isn't going to be too bad at long range. Definitely not. It's more likely this tank is going to use coated optics is what I'm saying. So that might balance out that poor view range that the vehicle is likely to have. All in all, I think this vehicle looks like it's going to be a solid tier 8. It's going to be a little bit slow, apart from that power to weight ratio, and the side armor is going to be awful. This thing's going to be a big old chunky tank, very easy to hit. Even the side of the turret is going to be poor as well, as the side turret is 140mm. Yeah, that's not really going to hold up against very much, is it? This thing will be a bit of a glass cannon double-barreled tank, and the gun depression you'll have to use it if you play one of these vehicles to be effective. And if you don't use that gun depression on a ridge line, you might as well be playing one of the other heavy tanks at the tier, in my opinion. Alright, so let's move on now. What have we got next in store? Well, it's the IS-3 So the IS-3 is not a tier 8 tank, it's a tier 9 tank, as it would suggest, as it leads on from the IS-22. And yeah, let's try and suggest an upgrade path for this vehicle so you can go into it with your best plan. Alright, so immediately, look at that tank. Bit of a weird one, right? Such a chunky tank. Look how long this thing is. If you thought the 7032 was long, the IS-32 is incredibly long. It's like a stretch tank. This thing is going to be so easy to lock down the tracks, especially at the back. Look at that gigantic wheel at the back. That's incredible. That'd be one of the easiest things to hit. I can imagine this thing's going to get tracked very often. So firstly, does it have space protection down the side? Well, I can kind of see a weld, but I'm not 100% certain. Looks like it's got a bit of space. Yes, it probably does. It looks like it's got a weld along there. So if you angle like this, the tank is going to have some space protection down the side, which should help it out. But it's a very tall tank, incredibly tall, as a matter of fact. Well, actually, thinking about it, it's not that tall considering the 7032 is. Now, this one's actually quite stout. A little bit more stout than the IS-22. I guess it's just because it's so wide and so long that it's a bit of an optical illusion, right? All right, so IS-32. What is the stock gun like? Well, you're using the stock 100mm gun. Now, what's weird about this tank is that it's actually got two 122mm guns that you can unlock on the vehicle. One will cost you 48,400 to research, and the other one will cost you 64,200. All right, so immediately, let's take a look at these guns and see if they are any good. All right, well, just making sure my head isn't blocking the statistics of these tanks. Oh, guns, I have to move them over there just in case it is. Oh, my lord. Okay, so here we go. So the 122 on this one, sorry, the 122 in the middle and the 122 on the right. Clearly, we can see that the penetration on the 122 is not very, the mid 122 is not very good. The accuracy, the aim time, very poor. And considering this is 46,000 to be able to research this gun, whoa, it's looking like a bit of a stinky tank in my opinion. Now, what is the advantage of this 122? Why would you ever get this gun? Well, you would get this gun because you can equip it without having the turret. As we can see, on this turret, you can use the 100 or the 122, the mid 122, I should say, whereas on the upgraded turret, you can use the BL9SD, which is that top gun on this tank. But I just can't imagine ever spending 48,000 experience, which is more than it would take you to get the turret, and you'd be a third of the way through to the next gun to be able to get it on this. I feel like this gun is just a big waste of time. I'll show you what the statistics are like of the two different guns with regards to their DPM. The DPM of the 100mm is 2,586 when you've got the thing fully upgraded. And then you lose, 500 damage per minute using the top 122mm, and your alpha damage only goes up to 390. Wargaming, you have to buff this 122mm to even mean that it's even any kind of relevance. It's an awful gun. It's got poor penetration. It's got a longer preparation time for the double shot, a 6-second intra-clip reload if you want to fire it like an auto reloader. Worse aim time, worse accuracy. For 90 alpha damage, you'd have to be a complete and utter muppet to want to use that gun and to spend the 48,000 free experience, or just invest your first 48,000 experience that you grind on the tank thinking, oh, if I have 122, I'm going to be good, right? No. I think this gun, I've got a funny feeling that the only reason why this gun is in the game is because it was meant to be on the IS-22. I think they were probably thinking about putting it on that vehicle, and then they decided that they wanted to keep it as a special treat for the premium 7032. And so they kept the IS-22 with 100mm to make it different to the 122mm premium at tier 8, and then they probably didn't know what to do with the gun, so they slapped it on here in the IS-32. It's irrelevant. It's a trap. Don't do it. Don't waste your free experience. Don't waste your regular experience. You're better to use the 100mm gun and to get the turret on the tank. Now, one thing I should ask is that can you actually mount the 122mm without having the tracks? And that is not the case. You can't do that, as it is actually much heavier. It's 3 tons heavier to be exact. And once you've put the top turret on this tank, you actually only have just under 3 tons spare. So I guess you could if you didn't want to use equipment, but that sounds like a stupid idea. So my recommended upgrade path for this tank is to firstly get the turret, then I would probably get the tracks, then I would get the top 122mm, and then I would get the engine. Because as we can see, while the engine's good, 80 horsepower probably just isn't worth it compared to upgrading the other aspects of the vehicle. Of course, eventually you want to get the engine on this tank before you start your grind for the ST2, as that's a good amount of experience, 200,000 to grind towards the tier 10. You're probably going to get benefit from the engine as you make your way there, but it is 26,000 experience, so watch out for that. So now we know how to fully upgrade the IS-32. Let's take a look at the statistics of the tank. So this gun, Yeah, it kind of feels a lot like the gun that you had at tier 8 on the premium, right? When we look at it, it's got the same alpha damage, the same intra-clip reload. Its reload, I guess, is 2 seconds better, though, which is very nice, and also manages to prepare its double shot half a second faster. Its penetration is better, especially on the APCR rounds that the vehicle has as its premium, and I guess it's more accurate with a bit better aim time. Yeah, I hope the other statistics of the vehicle definitely help it, because otherwise that gun is just not enough of an upgrade over the tier 8. So alright, so immediately 145mm of frontal hull armor. This thing looks amazing. I can imagine that if you hide the lower plate of this vehicle, it's going to be awesome. And of course, having that improved spaced mid-plate is going to make it so much better than the previous vehicle, the IS-22, was with regards to its side protection as well. It's also got 280mm of turret armor, which is a big upgrade over the IS-22, which had 235 and 150 at the side. Should provide you with a little bit more protection, although this is a gigantic side profile, and I think that you will be losing a lot of hit points if you expose that for too long. One thing that is nice about this vehicle is it now has 380 meters view range. That's way better than the 350 that the IS-22 had, and so if you use coated optics on this tank, vents and vertical stabilizers, yeah, you're going to be in a really good position, an incredibly good position, spotting your opponents at a decent distance. So all in all, what do I think about this vehicle? 38 kilometers forwards, 15 backwards, and a decent power to weight ratio of just under 14. This thing's going to be pretty fast. A lot faster than the IS-22 was, because it's going to have that better top speed, limited and better reverse. It's also got a pretty nice traverse speed. When I was playing this tank, it was very nimble. And it's got also 8 degrees of gun depression. This thing's going to be gnarly. I think it's going to be a very flexible tank. I think it's going to be great in the hands of a skilled player. I think that an excellent player is going to do incredibly well with this vehicle on a ridgeline, and just being able to have those 8 degrees will be absolutely amazing as to what players can do with the double shots. The problem that this tank will have is that 390 alpha damage just doesn't really feel like it's going to cut it at tier 9 heavy. And when you can land your double shots, sure, you're going to be doing 780 damage on average with your double shots. That's not much better than some of the other tier 9 heavy tank guns. E75 packing 490, for example. 780 is definitely better than 490, but when you're looking at the Type 4 heavy, for example, with 600 alpha, is it really worth having to prep the shell, to then have to reload both barrels and have a 4-second lockout time to be able to have that alpha? Well, I guess when we consider the mobility and the gun depression this tank has, it should be a nice one. I don't think it's going to be absolutely outrageously overpowered, but I think it will also still be dominant. Alright, so now that you know we've got to look forward to at tier 8 and tier 9, the moment that a lot of you will have been waiting for, what is the tier 10 like? What is the daddy double barrel vehicle going to be like in World of Tanks? Well, it's the ST2. So, really easy. You don't have to bother to get a new gun on the vehicle. Everything comes as standard. So let's take a look at the ST2. So the first thing to notice is that this is a very tall tank. I guess it's very similar to the ST1, right? And as you can see, height-wise, it's actually a little bit shorter than the ST1 is. That's a key advantage of the tank. Just a little bit more compact. And I have to admit, the ST2, when I was playing it, it did feel like quite a compact vehicle compared to the IS-32. Look how long this tank is. So long. The ST2 is quite a lot shorter. And the turret at the side should be less vulnerable, but the ST2 is quite a lot taller than the IS-32 is. And also, I'm really worried about this weak point. Now, this weak point, I wasn't able to pen it with standard ammunition, but I was able to pen it, not reliably, but quite frequently with premium penetration. So it's definitely going to be something to watch out for when you're using the turret armor of this tank. So the statistics of the hull armor of the ST2 are identical to the ST1. Nah, it's not exactly great news considering that the IS-4 does have a bit of an upgrade once you go to tier 10. One thing that I do really like about this vehicle is the fact that the muzzle brakes are kind of not actually parallel. They're twisted. One's gone clockwise and one's got counterclockwise. So it kind of makes it feel like this tank has like sad eyes, right? Yeah, it just feels like it's a little bit depressed, this ST2. Oh well. Well, hopefully it's going to have something to make up for that, right? Alright, so let's take a look at the gun. And finally, this is going to be the biggest alpha damage individual shot on any heavy tank in the game. If you're able to fire a double barrel, I guess. 440. So this gets the ST1's gun at tier 10, but it's also got double barrel capacity. What do I think about this gun? Well, let's just compare it to a single shotgun for a tier 9 tank. Yeah, okay. So it's pretty much identical. For some reason, Wargaming have actually given it quite poor premium penetration at 310 compared to 340. That's really awkward. Is Wargaming just... I don't understand as to why Wargaming would put these new vehicles going into the game with lower premium penetration. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't want the game to be pay to win. But surely they should adjust all of the premium rounds to be 310 millimeters of penetration and not just make this one substantially worse. It kind of affects the competitive nature of this vehicle. From a competitive standpoint, I think that this vehicle is going to be quite poor against tier 10s, and I probably wouldn't want to take it into a ranked scenario reliably, just because 310 millimeters of penetration is not enough to reliably go through some of the weak points on enemy vehicles. But it's not nearly as bad as something like the AMX M454 with 280, right? So I just think better accuracy, worse accuracy, better aim time, same alpha damage, same penetration but worse premium penetration. I guess 5-second intra-clip reload feels a little bit awkward to have that, but I guess it's how you have to have the vehicle to be able to balance it out. So this tank, if you prep the gun in 2.5 seconds, will be able to fire out a double barrel shot for 880 damage on average. That will very easily roll for 1,000. Very easily roll for 1,000. But then again, I guess it could roll down as low as 700 as well. There's going to be twice the RNG. But the great thing about this vehicle is that flexibility of the 8 degrees of gun depression that this tank has. This is effectively going to become the highest alpha damage double barrel tank. It's going to be the highest alpha damage heavy tank in the game, and to be able to have a double barrel tank with 8 degrees and to work a ridgeline, that's comparable to the 60 TP, for example. I guess the problem that the tank is going to have is that it's not as simple as firing a single click, but it's definitely an advantage to have the double barrel capacity. This thing should be truly monstrous. I'm just a bit worried about the armor of the vehicle. I was able to penetrate this thing's lower plate every single time pretty much with standard ammunition, because it has 150 millimeters of frontal hull armor, 140 at the side, 100 at the rear, 300 on the front of the turret is very nice, but 140 on the side of the turret. As soon as you turn it like this becomes an easy place to pen. I just don't know. Do you know what? The best way to take a look at this tank is just to compare it as to how it stacks up to an IS-4. So I think that's what we've got to do. I think we've got to go to the compare, we've got to add an IS-4 in here, and we've got to see how the two tanks stack up, because nobody is claiming that the IS-4 is an incredible vehicle. I don't think anyone would suggest, oh, go for the IS-4. It's an absolutely awesome tank. You're going to do so well with the IS-4. No, I don't think anyone really feels like that. And so where we compare these two tanks, the ST2 has a slightly better rate of fire. It has 2 degrees extra gun depression, but it has way worse turret traverse speed at just under 17 compared to the just under 23 that the IS-4 has with a 100% commander. It has worse aim time. It has worse accuracy, the same amount of hit points. Worse side armor, but better frontal hull armor, which is a bit of a weird one. With the IS-4, a lot of people will over-angle the tank to try and bait people into shooting the side. You're not really going to be able to do that so convincingly in the ST2, and I was kind of struggling with it a little bit. But I guess it is nice to have a slightly better frontal hull armor, but trust me, 150 isn't going to work very well anyway, and I was penetrating it very reliably with the lower plate. The turret armor looks like it will be better than the IS-4, but it does have that big old weak point on top. I guess the only problem with the IS-4's turret armor is that it can be overmatched because the top of it is actually only 30 millimeters thick. Alright, so now on to a mobility comparison of these vehicles. The IS-4 is actually faster. They've got exactly the same traverse speed, and the IS-4 has a practically identical power to weight ratio. I don't know. The IS-4 also has better view range, and that's about it. So really, what we're seeing here is you've got worse aim time, worse accuracy, you've got worse penetration on your premium rounds, you've got worse view range, you've got worse turret traverse, but you do have a touch better DPM. But you're able to deliver a double barrel shot. And of course, you have 2 extra degrees of gun depression, which will be a lifesaver. So I don't really see this thing being the new meta. I don't see it suddenly being the most dominant heavy tank on the battlefield, but I do think that it's a vehicle that will do very well in the hands of a capable player, because they're going to be able to make that double shot work. I think it's going to be absolutely disastrous and probably one of the worst tanks in the hands of a new player, because they're going to probably end up making that double shot work worse than if they just played an IS-4 and fired premium rounds and fired single shot capacity. And I do expect that Wargaming are probably going to buff the statistics of the ST2 just a little bit before release, because remember, this is the test server, everything is subject to change, and there will most likely be a further iteration before we see the vehicles coming in release of 1.7.1. So ladies and gents, boys and girls, that was the double barrel tech tree. I think the IS-2 looks great with the 100mm. I think the IS-3 looks amazing at tier 9. I just feel as if possibly we could have had the 440 alpha damage at tier 9 and the ST2 at tier 10 could have had just maybe 490 alpha damage. I think that would have maybe made the vehicles just a little bit more interesting. As it stands, they look like they're either going to be balanced or, in my opinion, slightly underpowered, but still definitely entertaining, exciting, and I can't wait to pick them up when they come in the 1.7.1 update. Just wish we'd had it in time for Christmas, so we'd had something new to be able to get our hands on, and not just trying to dress a tree and to gamble in loot crates. So ladies and gents, that was my look at the new double barrel tanks, and hopefully I was able to give you some recommendations as to how to upgrade your IS-2 and your IS-3 hopefully save you some free experience, or at least get you to invest it wisely. If you enjoyed the video, or maybe it was just helpful, give it a thumbs up, but if you hated it, give it a thumbs down. And stay tuned to the channel, as I will be reviewing the ST2, most likely tomorrow. And let me know in the comments what you think about the new double barrel tech tree. Do you think it looks completely broken? Do you think it looks disappointing? Do you think these vehicles are going to destroy the game? Do you think these vehicles are going to be balanced in the game? Let me know what you think. And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.